Welcome to the Human Biography Podcast. Today's episode, I've got a great friend and someone I've worked with before, Shah. Saad is from the Noetic Fund. Saad, welcome to the Human Biography Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Shah. Thank you very much.
Now, last time we saw each other, we were in Toronto and we're working on content for your incredible fund. Tell people out there, what is the Noetic Fund and how did it start?
Sure. The start is an interesting story, but what the Noetic Fund is, it's a venture fund that is focused on CNS, which is the central nervous system, or more generically, it's focused on mental health. So our objective is that we really want to find the solution to the problem, not just a way to treat the symptom. So we're agnostic in terms of what modalities are out there. We're looking at all the cutting edge modalities, but be that drug development or drug discovery, medical device, a SaaS platform, digital diagnostics, we're looking at it all. So it needs to be science-based, science-backed, strong IP component to it, of course. But the key thing is, can it be scalable? Is it commercializable? Is it accessible and widely accessible across the planet? So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. That's what Noetic does. In terms of our, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'll just keep going. Tell us more about why you got into this arena and why this fund is so important to you.
Yeah, this is, at the stage that I am in my life, this is kind of my, I don't know, this is my raison d'etre. This is why I exist. I almost feel that I finally arrived. I turned 50 last year, and we started this venture when I was 47. So for us, we're in our fourth year, and working with a great team that's been purpose-built that are equally passionate. But this is really about passion, right? When you take a look at what's going on around the world in terms of the unmet need, there are 1.2 billion people around the world that are diagnosed with a mental health ailment. How many people are undiagnosed? You can just venture to guess, right? I mean, this is by far the biggest unmet need. To put it in some context of comparison, there are about 460 million people around the world that are diagnosed with diabetes. There are around 20 million people around the world that are suffering from cancer. So, when you look at an unmet need like this and the fact that it's just getting worse and worse, a point of context for me is I don't know anybody in my inner circle that I've known growing up that has committed suicide.
Wow.
But when I look at my girls, and they're 23 and 18, they have known 4 or 5 individuals, that have gone down that path, unfortunately. And the ripple effects of that are just, unmeasurable, really, and just profound. So it is getting worse. Situation is getting worse. We don't have a real solution for it. So this endeavor was very much after spending so many years in the asset management business and investment management, and finally, finding a way in which we could use our toolbox that we've collected over the years and apply it to an area that we're so passionate about. Now, personally speaking, this is an area that I've been studying for a very long time. And the way I got to it was, is an interesting story. So I'll tell you the story, then we can figure out whether this is something you want to do or not.
That's great.
I had a profound experience when I was about 15 and a half years old. I used to live in East Berlin, and my father was posted there as a diplomat. And so we were, in East Berlin where the wall was. But my siblings and I studied in West Berlin. So every day we'd have to cross the border and go to school and come back. And the border that we would typically cross is a border called Bornholmer Straße. And this was, kind of heavily surveillance border, like all the borders were, but in particular, because there had been some incidents here before. Checkpoint Charlie is a very famous one, but that everybody knows about. You had few people cross that per se. So there were more, across these other borders that folks kind of tried to escape. And on one of those occasions, while crossing the border, I ran. You're never supposed to run. And I almost got shot and was sent home. And that was a massive wake-up call for me, because as a 15-and-a-half-year-old, you feel that you're invincible.
Wow.
On that walk back, I was questioning, why are we here? What's the purpose in life? What's the meaning of life? What are we supposed to do? This makes no sense. And I went down a path of being a seeker. So I try to find answers in sort of the traditional religious texts and schools of thought. couldn't find anything there. So I went one derivative below that, and I went into the esoteric sides of those religions, and then even further beyond that to the occult side of things. And I couldn't find an answer that was very, satisfying to me, and ultimately realized that they were all saying the same thing. But what was particularly interesting was they were talking about the role of consciousness or awareness. Yeah. And they were using terms that were very familiar in quantum physics, like non-locality, non-duality. So I went down the path of quantum physics to try and understand what is this, how does consciousness play a role? And to put it succinctly, if there's no observer, there's nothing observed. Mm. Krishnamurti said this philosophically, but we had David Bohm that put it in a mathematical formula. And he called it the implicate order. And so, and there was a reason why these two were best of friends. So the idea being is that, consciousness or awareness changes the context of what's happening. It literally changes the reality. And so my question was, well, what if we alter that state of consciousness? Does that change our reality? And I went down that path of trying to understand altered states of consciousness, which you can get through by way of meditation. You get through by way of, being in the desert for 40 days, 40 nights, under a lot of stress, no food, lack of sleep. And there's many different ways to get an altered state of consciousness. Dancing, the whirling dervishes. I mean, these are all part of getting into a trance state where you get into an altered state of consciousness, but of course, also psychedelics.
Yeah.
And that led me down a path where I was like, wow, when we take a look at the history of these plants or plant medicine and how pervasive it is across cultures, across civilizations, across time, it begs the question, what is the role that it played? And it played a very, very important role that we've kind of lost track of or forgotten about. But whether it is the Syrian root that is very, predominant within Mesopotamia and was used in during the times of the Persian Empire, whether it is ergot that was used by the Greeks up in Eleusis, you've got the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first ever written script in Western civilization that talked about a plant that grows underneath the river. You've got the Soma in India. You've got, texts that have come out of Africa with Ibogaine and Iboga. Across civilizations, you can find across cultures the role that plant medicine played. So we've learned a great deal from that. And there has been a renaissance movement in psychedelics to bring all that research back to the forefront. But it's gone so much beyond that, right? It's gone beyond that in terms of what it has taught us. And that's why this industry is exciting. So after having studied this for 20 years, Sharad, I realized that, okay, there's an industry starting to be formed here in 2018, 2019.
Right.
Warren Wright, who is my business partner, I've known him for 18 years, we worked together. He was the chief investment officer of the Carlyle Liquid Markets Group, a business that we ultimately sold to the Carlyle Group. And we wanted to come into this industry just with our own capital. So it was a very organic endeavor. We put our own money that belonged to our friends and family. And that was the start of Noetic in March of 2020. We technically launched the first fund then.
With this growth, this renaissance of the psychedelic revolution, renaissance, whatever you'd like to call it, it's happening. It's robust. The governments are now, looking at how this is helping people by legalization through testing. Tell me about the type of companies that are coming out of the woodwork that you are attracted to, that you're looking at, that these are in the big realm going to help people in our societies. Can you tell me about some of the companies that you're looking at?
Yeah, we're, because we're focused on the central nervous system, and our objective is to find those researchers, scientists, and entrepreneurs that have something that can be truly commercialized. And that just means accessible, that it can be scaled up, as opposed to something that is just available for a few. We're looking at all these modalities. So definitely in psychedelic drug development, drug discovery, there's been a lot of development. That's one area, Sharad. But what's also exciting are all these other modalities that are coming forward. We've got transcranial magnetic therapy and derivations of magnetic therapy, derivations of ultrasound, derivations of these other medical devices, med tech. You've got wearables as well that address the problems in some way. And what we're realizing when we step back from the trees and look at the forest is that there actually is now a real, you're seeing ways in which we can attack the problem, but using complementary modalities. So it's
Yeah,
not just the case of, well, you should only go down one pathway,
that's right.
right? You can actually mix these pathways, intermingle these pathways, complement these pathways with one another to solve the problem. So just because you're doing transcranial magnetic therapy or vagus nerve stimulation, right? Or, through certain, derivations of, transcranial magnetic therapy to get to
Yeah.
the root cause of the issue, targeting the amygdala, be that the neocortex, wherever the issues reside, predominantly kind of focused on the default mode network. We can now engineer a treatment that is holistic and that
Yes.
actually solves the problem. That's where this industry is going. It's not just a renaissance period for psychedelics. This is very, very much a renaissance period for neuroscience.
I've worked with people and spoken to people, interviewed people in the realm of looking at psychotherapy, is looking at counseling, using different modalities of psychedelics, and it's working. People are seeing a different light than just having prescription drugs being fed to them by different doctors and whatnot. So there's something really positive with this movement, and our society is accepting this. It's slowly coming out of the workload. The conversations around it is not just taboo anymore. It's something that is actually, people are excited to have this alternative opportunity to have some type of gain in their brain, something that can really transform their feelings, something that can transform their opportunities to be happy. And so I think this is quite lovely. Yeah.
No, it's we're realizing how much of an effect depression, anxiety, PTSD
Right.
have had on our cognitive functioning.
That's right.
But there's been very little to start to address, sort of neurodegeneration. We've kind of been focused in this industry so far on psychiatric care and tools for addressing the problem. But there's a lot going on in neurodegeneration as well, and that's important because we forget that after having spent years under depression or anxiety, PTSD, major depressive disorders, treatment-resistant depression, that has a massive impact on our cognitive abilities. So what's the next step? Once now you are sort of starting to get healed, and you're functioning in a, and happier about your circumstances, about the world that you live in, less self-loathing, more acceptance of others, a little bit more compassion, more tolerance, that now we've got to start to build up your cognitive abilities as well.
Right.
Those are also areas that we're looking at. So it's getting more and more exciting as we go on, and it's a great time to be in this space. I would equate it to where oncology was 10 years ago.
Wow.
Right? There's been massive developments in oncology, of course.
That's right.
And there's a lot that we've learned from oncology. This is really important to the equation, which is to answer the question, well, why now? Why should we be looking at neuroscience now? Why not before? Why not later? No. There's a confluence of events that have taken place, much like you and I are having this conversation on
Absolutely.
Zoom, right? Zoom wouldn't be able to be there if it wasn't for the fact that cloud computing had to be in place. Basic broadband computing had to be in place, and you need to have really high-performing Wi-Fi.
That's right.
Once that's in place, now the companies like Zoom can come out. In the same way, that platform has been set for neuroscience. We've learned a great deal from oncology and precision oncology, that we have, taken that language and understanding and applied it to precision medicine here with precision psychiatry and neuroscience. We have got AI that's coming into the equation that allows us to look at different formulations and rule out things and speed that whole process up. We've also done a lot in terms of trying to understand that this is probably the most profound example of precision medicine when it comes to psychedelics in particular, and interacting with the serotonin receptors and the dopamine receptors in the right way. So a lot of that has come together to make it an incredible playing field for these entrepreneurs and scientists to come up with some great discoveries.
And there's some incredible companies out there. Now, tell me the working model of your fund. How does it work? And tell us more about it.
The fund is structured as fund one we launched in March of 2020, my apologies. And we closed it in the summer of 2021. In total, we've looked at 1,000 opportunities, which are seed stage, early stage, okay, within the CNS space. We can look at later stage as well, but predominantly we've been really focused on seed and early stage. After looking at 1,000 opportunities, we've in total invested in 32 companies.
Wow.
24 of those companies are in Fund 1. Fund 1 had 6 exits quite early on. We redeployed that capital back into new investments, and that's done very well. It's generated over 400% growth in the net asset value, which is remarkable. So that includes realized and unrealized positions. Fund 2, we launched in the summer of 2021. We're going to close that at the end of April. We raised about 40 million for that. We're looking to raise up to 60 or more. And we've already made 5 investments, and I've got an incredible pipeline of deals that we're looking at. But now we've started to engage some institutions that are at the federal level and international level that I'll be able to name in a few weeks, that is going to be profound in terms of our ability to access the best of the best ideas out there.
Wow.
And that's what makes this compelling, which is you want to be at the epicenter of being able to see the best ideas and where they're coming from. And some of those institutions are public, some of them are private, and our partnerships with them is just going to be incredibly profound because we'll get to see some of the greatest ideas out there.
Well, I mean, people are going to be watching this and they're going to want to know, how do they get on your radar? How do they get into your investment pool? What are you looking for? Yeah.
Right now, this industry is catering more to family offices, single family offices, multifamily offices, impact investors in a very big way, and multi-investment platforms that are seeking a way to have an impact, make an impact through their investment. Right. So yes, we've had profound returns on financial capital so far, and a lot of that is realized, but this is an enormous return on human capital. Yeah. So it resonates more with family offices. So if they need to get in touch with us, best is to email me at saad@noeticfund.com. You can go onto our website, noeticfund.com. We're really looking for investors that want to be engaged. We like to engage our investors. We have Zoom sessions that we hold with some of the best thought leaders out there, some of the most interesting thought leaders out there that are doing cutting edge in terms of their science, their development, all the work that they're doing. We highlight authors, we highlight the key leaders in the space. We want to bring out more awareness. We're finally at that point, Shara, that we can at least have a conversation about mental health without, in hushed terms or being, kind of whispering it.
Yeah.
That's starting to be comfortable.
It's comfortable conversation.
Yeah, it is. And now we can start talking about all these modalities that can solve the problem. And that's fantastic.
I have to say, I mean, we're lucky that there's funds like yours that are in this work. This is so important. It could be, people look at different sectors on how they invest, on what they're looking at, but really every person has somebody in their life that they pass by, that they look at, that they know that is going through something that is happening in their mind, in their heart, in their body, that needs that help. And this is a great solution to look at. Just having someone's eyes and expertise from an industry where capital can be raised to help people. You are definitely somebody that we need to be looking at, and it's so promising that you exist. I'm very excited about what's going on with the Noetic Fund, and I look forward to hearing what's happening in the coming months for you guys this year. What is that 2023 looking like for you? Yeah.
2023 for us, is we're focusing more towards neurodegenerative opportunities. We want to focus on that. It's becoming more complex. We're realizing more and more from a science perspective now, finally, what the mystics and others have been talking about all along, which is that to heal means to be whole.
Beautiful.
To be whole requires the mind, body, and soul. And psychedelics and what's happening in the psychedelic industry, but in particular what's happening in CNS and neuroscience, is getting more interesting because you are getting other disciplines that are weighing in on the issue and on the situation, right? You need, so it's not just about the scientists and the clinician. It's about the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the social worker, others from different disciplines and paths that are going, hey, here's what we've observed about how, our mood gets affected by things that we eat. The gut microbiome and the brain connection is profound. We're seeing a lot of research coming out of that is going to be very compelling. That's interesting. The intersection between peptides and psychedelics is going to get more and more interesting going forward, right? How do we find a way to solve the circadian rhythm problem? Because believe me, if we can find a way to solve sleep without having to take the drugs for it, right? There are other modalities that can help us sleep better. I bet 35 to 40% of these of issues, pertaining to mental health will be solved with that in a very big way, right? So these are all areas that we're looking at. There's also now, of course, real industry being formed in longevity.
Yes.
Anti-aging, so living longer. Well,
Absolutely.
how do you do that? At some point, it's all about inflammation, right? And inflammation is a direct result of what we're thinking about and what we're worried about in many cases, right? It's not just a purely physiological sort of attribute.
Stress is a huge one.
Exactly. Stress is one of the leading causes of diabetes. People forget it's not just sugar intake. So that's what we're learning about. We're building those connections. It's kind of like we're building these neural pathways, by way of some big mind map that is connecting all these disciplines. That's where it gets exciting. So we need to have those discussions with those other disciplines to better understand the problem, because everybody's looking at it from a different prism. But now when we put it together, we can solve the problem.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you for taking time today. I appreciate the information. We're going to share your site, the Noetic Fund. Saad, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it. There's so much more work that is happening that will be done. And it's because of organizations and funds like yours that is helping to look at what is the solution, what is the problem, and who are the people out there that are creating the best opportunities for science, for education, and for results. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on the Human Biography podcast. It's wonderful to work with you. You're certainly one of the best storytellers that I know out there. So it's a real pleasure and an honor for me to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Saad.